I don't like website builders. And I'd go as far as saying that I really don't like website builders, but there is a very good reason for why I don't like them. Now, I spent years trying to perfect my engineering skills to put them to the test and build those amazing websites, but sometimes, building websites takes too long, so you go ahead and you find a website builder where you can really quickly implement the UI. But that's mostly where it ends. Where do I do all the other fancy stuff? How do I connect my backend? How do I work with a database? How can I install my favorite NPM package? How can I write my custom CSS or work with my favorite IDE? Or how the hell do I do Git tracking? You can't! And me saying that I don't like website builders cracked some hearts. So a company decided to reach out to me saying that possibly they can change my mind. Now, Wix has recently released Wix Studio, and they were like, well, please, Philip, take it for a spin and look at some of the incredible backend functionalities that we've implemented to make the workflow for you feel like you're an actual developer. Now, when I heard that, I was like, that skepticism has come up because the track record with website builders is not great. But I was like, you know what? I will take it for a spin. And I decided that I'm going to make this video as a behind the scenes look into how I play around with Wix Studio, what are the features that are offered, and we'll get to find out together if it's actually good and if it's going to change my mind. Without any further ado, let's jump into Wix Studio and specifically into Wix Studio's developer features. All right, so I launched Wix Studio and I'm going to create a project from the blank canvas. Now, as this is loading, I want to enable the development features because I know it's a thing that you have to enable. And I kind of want to do a very quick overview of the code panel to see what's there and just to see how excited I get. Now, as with any kind of website builder, they always offer you a variety and a huge amount of these beautiful components that you can just drag and drop onto your website, essentially to just create your UI. It just takes a matter of minutes rather than hours. And in this case, maybe I can just grab a container and just drag it onto the screen here. And you see that I have this container that I can work with and position differently and so on. But we're not here for that. We're here for the extended functionality of the Wix Studio, which is adding and being able to work with JavaScript, backend code, GitHub integrations. Oh, NPM packaging. Oh, this is just so exciting. Let's just start coding and actually look into it. So it's setting up developer mode, and I have this internal feeling that this could be really good, but I don't want to get my hopes up because I just don't know. Usually with website builders, the code and the way it's represented and the way you code things is just very difficult. But let's have a very quick look here. So we have some page code where we can see that we can code some JavaScript to target specific elements. We have our global code, which I assume is just a global file code where we can also write JavaScript, but it probably allows us to create functions that we can reuse across our pages. We have CSS, love a bit of CSS and proper CSS because this is the globals.css file. We can actually write proper CSS to reference the file globally so we can really, pick the little things and adjust them how we wish. And then we have some advanced features. So we have the backend code feature, databases, packages and apps, GitHub. Oh my God, this is so exciting. Okay, backend code. Write backend code in Wix IDE. Work in a VS Code base. Yes, please let it be the way I'm thinking this is going to be. First of all, let's send the fundamentals here. VS Code is the best integrated development environment there is. I use it all the time. If you're a fan of VS Code, make sure you smash the thumbs up button to let me know. Now, if we get a VS Code in the browser, I assume, or connects to VS Code, this is going to be fantastic because we're going to feel at home. I mean, I know I am because I know exactly how to use VS Code. It's my favorite environment for writing code. So if it integrates with Wix Studio, fantastic. We'll open that in just a second. Databases. So here we can add external databases and create our own collections of elements. Packages and apps, NPM. Yes. NPM. NPM. Do you know how amazing having NPM is in a no-code website builder? It's literally all the functionality of creating your application to be much better. It's just here because you can install an NPM package like you could with any kind of package manager. And suddenly you have this extra functionality you can add into your app. You're also not limited to just what's inside Wix Studio, but to also all the other NPM packages that are available to you. I can see we have some Velo packages as well. Velo is the development platform here in Wix Studio that allows us to kind of develop the way we do. And then finally, we have the GitHub integration. So we can actually connect this specific code that we're going to be working with to a GitHub repository and manage and version our code and push changes and commit changes. And this is just amazing. Now, I'm really excited about this. So I'm just going to open the Wix IDE and let's see what happens. Okay. Come on. VS Code, please let it be exactly VS Code. Yes. We have VS Code. So we have all the extensions that we want to use. So I can install like Prettier to like format my code or the language I'm going to be working with. And we have a Wix AI assistant. We're going to talk about that a little later. But in our Explorer, we can see that we have a source code. And as part of the source code, we have 4 folders, a backend folder, pages, public, and styles. Now, styles is, as I assume, the global.css. We have the backend folder where we can write our backend code. And in this case, you can write it probably in any language that you want because you have the extensions here in VS Code Studio. We're going to do it in Node.js when we do come to building our little project. We have the pages. So this, I believe, references the pages that we saw here. So we have the page code. And the current page that we're working with is the home. That's the one that was rendered with the blank canvas. So that's the file that was also rendered for us here. And we have the master page. This definitely applies to the global code. So anything we write in the master page will show up in the global code, I believe. All right, so that was my initial reaction to the developer features of Wix Studio. I have to say, I'm actually really impressed. Now, I still don't know how well they're going to work overall, but there is a lot of hope because what I saw so far is nothing I have seen on any other website builder. The flexibility here is quite large. I mean, I feel at home as a developer because of this integration of this VS Code IDE, of the flexibility that's being offered. So I can really see a lot of potential of, experienced developers coming into Wix Studio to actually develop something really quickly without having to spend ages on creating the UI. So I'm really interested how that's going to go. Now my job is to actually take this away and to look into the documentation, to learn stuff about Wix Studio, to understand how things work, and then to come back to you guys to teach you guys and give you a very quick overview of the developer features, how they work, and essentially how I rate them. Let's go. What was supposed to be a 5-minute read into the documentation, just a quick peek, turned out to be a 2.5-hour read, and it's 1 a.m. And what can I say? I am extremely excited about what I'm reading. The potential here, it seems fantastic. I'm not going to spoil anything. I've got a bit more reading to do tomorrow, but I'm super excited, and I think you guys are gonna love it. So I did a deep dive into all of the developer features, and now I kind of want to go over them quite quickly and swiftly and show you the possibilities that are offered by Wix Studio to really make the development flow much nicer. And what can I say? It's very, very, very exciting. First of all, I want you to understand how you can control the code and how you can control specific elements that you drag and drop into the Wix editor when you are actually building the front-end UI. Now, let's code it in the Wix IDE. So we'll launch the IDE, so we'll launch the VS Code in the browser. And then I kind of want to jump in and explain a little bit about the structure that we have inside the editor. So we'll just let this load. And as I open the source code folder, we have all of these folders like I've discussed previously. But I want to highlight that in the pages folder, we have these two first files. The master page file. This is a file that directly reflects the global code here. And then we have the home file. This is the file that directly reflects the home page, which is the page that we see right here in front of us. And this is the page code file here, plus any of the CSS. Now, what's the cool thing? Well, let's have a look at the implementation here. I want to drag a title, and I want to create a title. I'm just going to leave it as it is. But let's say that maybe I want to change this title programmatically, and I want to give it some styling. So how are we going to work with the JavaScript and the CSS to give this styling without using any of the Wix Studio editor to do that? Well, let's actually go into the code, and we can see that we're going to be working with the page code because we're going to be directly referencing this page and the CSS. Now, what's cool about this is that as you target the specific element that you dragged into your UI, you'll be able to see two tabs that appear underneath. In the page code, you'll be able to see the Properties and Events tab and the CSS classes. Now, the Properties and Events tab allows you to specify a specific ID for this specific element. In this case, I'm going to call it title. And this is the ID that you can reference in your JavaScript code to change it, to do things dynamically as you wish. Now, the CSS classes is like any CSS class. You can actually add a custom class to this specific element. I'm just going to call it my title, and press enter. And as you can see, that class has now been created, and you can create multiple classes. And therefore we can now target this to style it in any way we want. So first of all, let's actually programmatically maybe change this title to something else. So I'm going to go into my home.js file. And here, rather than doing a document.getElement by ID as we would in JavaScript, we have to use a little bit of the velo notation. And in this case, it would be a $W. And we're going to reference the ID here. In this case, the ID is called title. And we're going to change the text, and we're going to make it equal to say something, hi, my name is Philip. And now, as we've set this up, if I go back into my Wix Studio, you can see that this JavaScript notation has taken place. And now when we actually do a preview of this code, what you'll notice is once it actually launches and we will see the developer console launch, you'll see that this has now programmatically changed on its own as soon as the application has launched. Now, that's one way of being able to control and the flexibility that you're offered. But now let's actually look at the CSS. Well, what can we do with the CSS? Well, we've added a class to this called myTitle. So now if I go into the styles folder and in the globals.css, and I'll reference this class as I would any other way. So I'll call it myTitle. And in this case, I'll give it some parameters. Just for showcase reasons, I'm just going to give it a background color, and I'm going to say green. And now if I go back, you will see that this CSS has now been applied, and you can see that it has been styled here. Now, CSS can be rendered as you're loading the page. JavaScript is runtime, so we have to run the app for the effect to take place. So now I'm going to preview it, it's going to launch, and the text's changed, and the styling changed. Now, obviously, this styling and this text is not appealing in any way. This just really showcases the flexibility you have with just working with each individual element and being able to write custom JavaScript code that's going to run, and then specific and very custom CSS that you can apply to this one element and also change it as you wish. Now let's talk about a really important part when it comes to working with the backend. Now, Wix Studio gives you backend functionality, but if you are ever to call any APIs that do some external call to a service, well, then you're most probably going to be working with API keys, and you'll have to have some way to manage them. Now, you can't just put them directly in the code, and therefore that's where a secret manager comes in. Luckily enough, Wix Studio Insider Developer Tools does have one, and I'll show you how to use it really, really easily. All you have to do when you're on your website is click on the Wix Studio icon and click on Dashboard. This will open up another page. Let's just wait for this to load. And then as part of this left navigation sidebar, you have Developer Tools down below. And as you can see, as part of Developer Tools, we have a Secrets Manager. So let's click on the Secret Manager and see what we find. So what the secret manager offers us is the ability and gives us a place to store all our secrets. So all our API keys, all our tokens, and whatever you need to create those API calls and work with the application. So we can store a secret and we can just name it. I'll call it a test secret. And then we'll give it some value. I'll just type in some value. You can have a look what it is. If that's the value you like, perfect. And then you can just save it. Now this secret called test secret will now just remain in the secrets manager. Now that we have our secrets, we need to go into our Wix IDE and actually retrieve that secret in some way. Now, as you remember, we had some folders and we had the backend folder. Now the backend folder has a default permissions.json file that they give for us, but in this case, we can just create our own file. This is going to be our backend file that we're going to be working with. In this case, I'll call it retrieve token.js. Now let's wait for this to be created. Here we go. And how do we go ahead and retrieve that token? We import get secret from the Wix secret backend, and then we create a function, an asynchronous function. I'm going to call it const get token, and then it will be an asynchronous function like so. And then here we're going to create a variable. We're going to call it token. And that will be equal to, and here we're going to await for the get secret. And inside of this, we're going to pass in the name of our secret. In this case, it was test secret. Test secret. And that's it. And as you can see, this is what you need to do to actually retrieve that token, and then you can use it somewhere else. So in this case, maybe at the end of this function, we can just return the token. And there we go. And that's the function finished. So now when we actually call any external APIs, we won't have any trouble exposing any secrets. Now, I really want to touch on the AI Wix assistant that this VS Code IDE provides. And that's one of the benefits of actually using the browser IDE rather than any IDE of your choice when you're working with GitHub, because then you get this Wix assistant that can actually help you out while you're writing the code. Now, if I click on the Wix AI Assistant, you'll see three options. You'll see an option to generate code for us. You'll see an option to fix my code, and you'll have some documentation which you can look up to learn more about the Wix Studio features, APIs, and how to code things in Wix. Now, I'm not going to do the generate code just yet because I'm going to save that for the project that we will build, but I want to do the fix my code part. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this function and just leave this code as it is. And for example, we can assume that maybe you might be working with Wix and you come across a problem. You import your package into the backend and then you want to await for the secret, and suddenly something is wrong. And you hover over the await and it says, well, you can't have an expression await and it's only allowed in this module. And you're reading this and it doesn't make any sense. So you therefore have the option to go to the Wix AI Assistant and get some help. So I'm going to say, hey, Wix AI Assistant, fix my code. And then you paste the current code that you're working with into the editor. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to press enter. And now Wix AI Assistant says, well, to help you fix this code, tell me about any errors or problems you're having. So here you can go ahead to explain the code. In this case, I'm just going to hover over the await, and I'm going to paste this whole error here. And as we paste the error, we wait for the Wix AI Assistant to generate the response. Now, working with code like this is actually really handy because it can really speed up your workflow, and you don't really have to Google for the answers and try and find the relevant one. It will do a bespoke analysis of your code and give you the answer. And there we go. We have the answer, and it says the error you're encountering is due to the use of the await keyword outside the async function. Of course, because if it's not an asynchronous function, what am I awaiting for, right? And it makes sense. And it gives you this whole explanation. You can either copy the code or you can just insert the code. I'm just going to delete what I currently have here, and I'm just going to press the insert button, and it's going to insert the whole snippet as it should be. And there you go. That's the snippet fixed and working. All right, so I think now is the time to actually work on a very little project within Wix Studio to show you the whole kind of implementation from the beginning to a very basic working project. Now, the idea here is that we do end up using some external API, and I have found the perfect simple API that we can work with, and it's called Ageify.io. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but essentially they provide you with a very simple endpoint where you pass in the name as the parameter, and essentially it gets back to you with the estimation of how old that person is. But I want to make it a little bit more complex, so we're going to use the API with the localization, where not only we pass in the name, but we also pass in their country that they're from, and therefore get a much more accurate estimation. Now, how am I picturing this? Well, I see a title, I see two inputs, one for the name, the other one for the age, and then a button that sends the request to the backend. The backend calls the API, it fetches the data, it returns the data back to the front end, and then it renders it in our actual front end app, telling us that Philip is, for example, if that's the name I typed in, is 26 years old. It probably won't be that, and I'm curious to see how old the API will actually tell me that I am. All right, so I've got my coffee. We've got a blank canvas, and it starts to create the project. I'm just going to speed run through creating the UI, and you can watch me very quickly as I do it, and then I'll touch on the little developer features that we need to add. So let's go. Here I'm adding a title. I'm just going to completely remove it because we don't want anything to render, and we only want something to render when the response actually comes back. So I'm just going to delete it. Now, this is the finalized UI that we're going to be working with. So we have the title, we have two inputs, we have a button, and then we have a piece of text right here that we're going to also render to once the result comes back. Now it's time to actually add the specific IDs so we can target all of these elements and actually get them to do something with the JavaScript. So with the text, I'm going to open up the code panel. You'll see the properties in the fence, and I'm going to call this age. I'll just give it the age ID. Then we have the button. The button, I'm just going to call it get age button. That's what I'm going to call it. Then we have the country code. I'm just going to give it an ID of country. And then we have the name, first name. I'm just going to call it name. All right, so now that we finished building our UI, it's time to write the JavaScript code and the backend code to actually make this whole project come to life. Now I'm going to go ahead into the code editor. And as you can see, we have nothing written there. So let's actually write some code, but I'm not going to do it myself. It's actually time to test the Wix AI assistant at its code generation. So I'm going to provide a prompt for it, and we'll see how much of it can actually do. So I'm just going to copy this API call that we're going to have, and I'm going to say to the code, I have this API endpoint, and I'm going to pass it in and ignore my horrible spelling. And now I'm going to say, I need the user to use the input from two fields, and I want the input to be submitted to the backend after the button is clicked. Then I'm going to say, then I want the backend to pass these values as URI components to the URL, to the API URL, and return the result of the API call back to the front end. All right, I think that's enough. So let's actually see what this Wix AI assistant will generate. You can see it's not super detailed, but it's enough input for it to understand what we actually require. So I'm intrigued to see how well this assistant is going to do at trying to interpret what I'm telling it and trying to see how much of a full solution it can produce. Okay, sure, I can help you with that. First, let's create a function in the backend to make an API call. All right, so let's do that. So here we have a fetch call, all right. So I'm going to, what is it saying? So it's telling me to create an ageify.jsw file. So I'm going to do that in the backend. So I'll create a new file here, call it this. And then the cool thing, like I showed you previously, you can get the code and you can just insert it. And let's evaluate it. So we see that we're importing a fetch library. We're doing an asynchronous function where we pass in two values, the name and the country ID, like you can see here. And we're awaiting the response, and then we're sending back the response in JSON format. Otherwise, we're throwing an exception. Okay, so this seems like it's good. Now, as we scroll down, we can see that this function gets the request, so this is what I explained, and now it actually provides us with the front-end implementation. So let's go back to home, let's delete this console log that we have, and let's insert this function. Here we can see that it's calling the function that we declared from the backend, and it's creating an onReady function, so as soon as we run it, it's going to fetch and call the button, so we need to pass that in. Then our name input was declared just as name, and country just as country, country. And we're getting the value of these as soon as the button is clicked. And then we're calling the API with these two inputs, and we're console logging that data. Otherwise, we're returning the response. Now, I'm not going to change anything. I'm actually just going to run it and see if we actually get a response. So let's preview this. Our developer console needs to launch. And now I'm going to type in my name, Philip. I'm going to type in like the country code for Poland, which is my home country, get my age. And we can see we get a response. And we actually get the response that we need. So we can see that my age is 41. That kind of sucks because I'm 26. Stupid API, stupid API. Okay, so now we know that works. Let's actually output it to the text that we have right here below. To this text with the ID of age, which you can see right here. All right, so let's go back into the IDE. And rather than console logging this data, we can just keep it. But I'm going to also add... there we go. One of the calls to, in this case, rather than having it age, it will be, is it going to be age? It is going to be age. That's what we called it. And then we're going to change the text to say the name of your age is, and then here we can pass in, and actually it would be these side quotes, like so. Is, and here we'll pass in data.age, like so. All right, so let's go back to here. Let's run it. There we go. Type in Philip, type in Poland, get my age. And there we go. If we just close the developer console, you see the name of your age is 41. Hello, editor Philip here. I apologize. I have no idea how I missed it, and I'm only seeing this now. What is the name of my age? How does that even make any sense? What is the age of my name? Sorry, folks. You're probably as confused as I am. Please don't be. It's my mistake. Back to the video. And we can just slightly improve the appearance of it to make it a little larger. So let's give it like 600. And let's try, or maybe let's give it like 800. And let's try with another age just to make sure that it definitely works. So we're running it. Okay, let's type in James, and let's type in, I don't know if it's like UK, if that's the UK, or is it GB? Okay, the name is null, so it's just GB. And there we go. I think it's time to wrap up and actually give some final thoughts on this website editor. Now, I did start with an absolute disliking to any kind of website builder, because I just found them to really take away from the developer. Now I know and I understand that these website builders are created for people who might not be as technical, so the developer features didn't matter. But now as we're moving through the restructuring of how we work as engineers with all the AI coming out and with all the kind of extra features, I think speed and simplicity is kind of really out there, and these no-code tools are really out there to allow us to push the boundaries. But now with no-code website builders actually coming into the space and trying to create a website builder that's dev-focused is giving a lot of flexibility to how quickly we can create things. Now, as you saw, the UI took me a very small proportion of time, and it's, of course, it's not the best UI, but it gives you an idea of how quickly you can actually build a prototype if you need it. You saw how the Wix AI assistant really just generated the whole code for us and then understood everything that I told him with not too much prompt. So that was actually quite impressive. And the best thing about it is that it just worked. And you can see we're working with a backend, we're making API calls inside this website builder. So you can really create a very basic website and just launch it in a day when you're a developer and you kind of know your developer and backend tools. So how do I rate this website builder? Honestly, I am quite impressed. I have to give it a solid 8.5 out of 10. So has Wix Studio changed my mind? Honestly, I think it did, and I'm really excited to see how much more developer features we're going to see from Wix Studio, but also how much more developer tools we're going to see from other website builders.